Good morning, this blessed Wednesday, the 21st of January. We rise today not by accident, not by chance, but by grace. We rise carrying questions in our hearts, burdens on our backs, and hope quietly resting in our souls. And still we rise. Today's prayer reminds us of a sacred truth. God is a keeper of promises and a maker of ways. When walls seem firm and paths appear closed, God is already standing at a door we cannot yet see. Doors do not open by noise alone, nor by fear or force, but by faith, patience, and purpose. So this morning let us breathe deeply, stand firmly, and believe boldly. What was shut is not final. What was delayed is not denied. God will open the door, and when it opens, it will open wide enough for healing, for growth, and for a future greater than what we imagined yesterday. There is a rhythm to life that cannot be hurried, a sacred cadence written into the marrow of the morning and the hush of the night. God's timing moves like breath, steady, unseen, essential. We often arrive at our prayers with clocks in our hands and calendars in our pockets, measuring hope by minutes and miracles by deadlines. We ask for answers now, relief now, doors now. But God, patient and precise, answers in a language deeper than urgency. God answers in time, holy time, where nothing is rushed and nothing is wasted. We learn early that waiting feels like standing in a long line with an aching heart. Waiting can feel like winter lingering too long on the bones, like a song that resolves just after we have stopped listening. Yet waiting is not emptiness. It is the womb where purpose grows. It is the quiet classroom where strength learns its letters and faith practices its steps. God's timing teaches us that delay is not denial, it is preparation wearing a different coat. We have all stood before closed doors and knocked until our knuckles remembered pain. We have leaned our weight against hinges that would not move and wondered if God had stepped away for a moment. But doors are not merely barriers, they are teachers. A closed door asks us to look inward, to listen closely, to become ready for what waits on the other side. God's timing ensures that when the door opens, we will not only enter, we will endure. There is a tenderness in the way God times our lives. God knows when our hands are strong enough to carry blessing without dropping it, when our hearts are soft enough to receive joy without fear. Some gifts arrive early and spoil us. Others arrive late and save us. God's timing protects the gift and the giver alike. It keeps us from wearing crowns that would bend our necks and bearing names we have not yet grown into. In the waiting, we discover ourselves. We learn which prayers are born of fear and which rise from faith. We learn the sound of our own voices when no applause follows. We learn to sit with ourselves, to make peace with silence, to trust that stillness is not abandonment. God's timing trains us to hear the whisper beneath the noise, the promise beneath the problem, the yes hidden inside the not yet. Morning after morning, the sun keeps its appointment with the horizon. It does not rush to be seen, nor delay to be dramatic. It arrives right on time, teaching us without words that consistency is a kind of mercy. So it is with God's timing. The promise does not forget us. The answer does not lose our address. It comes when the soil is ready and the seed has learned how to break open. We often believe that speed equals favor, that the quickest victory is the truest one. But God knows the long road builds legs that do not falter. God knows the slow fire refines gold. What we gain too quickly we may lose too easily. What we grow into we tend to keep. God's timing allows us to grow roots before we reach for the sky, so that when storms arrive, and they will, we remain standing. There are seasons when the weight feels unbearable, when prayers echo back to us unchanged. In those moments, doubt tries to sit beside us like an old acquaintance. But even then, God's timing is at work. It is shaping character in the dark, teaching endurance in the unseen. The seed does not protest the soil for being heavy. It pushes through because life is calling it upward. So we push, trusting that what feels like pressure is often purpose pressing us forward. God's timing also heals us from our impatience with one another. When we learn to trust divine timing, we grant ourselves grace and extend it outward. We stop demanding instant perfection from ourselves, from others, from the world. We learn that becoming takes time, that love ripens slowly, that forgiveness is a journey with rest stops. God's timing teaches compassion by reminding us that everyone is on a schedule written in a language we cannot read. When the door finally opens, and it opens to a version of us that has been shaped by the wait, we step through wiser, steadier, more awake. We recognize the blessing not because it dazzles, but because it fits. It fits our hands, our hearts, our calling. We know then that the waiting was not wasted, it was the tailoring. So on this Wednesday morning, balanced between what has been and what will be, we choose trust. We lay our clocks down and lift our eyes up. We speak to our restless hearts and remind them that God has never been late. Not once. Not ever. God's timing has carried ancestors through wilderness and children into promise. It has turned mourning into dancing and ashes into beauty. We breathe in patience and breathe out fear. We thank God not only for open doors, but for the strength built while they were closed. We honor the sacred pause, the holy in-between. And we walk forward, not ahead of God, not behind, but right on time. There comes a moment in every life when the door does not open, no matter how carefully we knock or how long we stand waiting. In that moment, the heart is quick to whisper a harsh conclusion: I was not chosen. I was not worthy, I was forgotten. But closed doors are not the language of rejection, they are often the grammar of protection, written in a hand kinder than we can see at first glance. A closed door can feel like a verdict when it is only a pause. We live in a world that confuses access with approval, entrance with value. Yet God does not measure our worth by where we are allowed to go, but by who we are becoming while we stand still. A door closed by God is not an insult to our dreams, it is a shield around our destiny. Many times we ask to enter rooms that would demand too much of us too soon. We knock on doors that glitter with promise but hide sharp corners inside. God, seeing the full room when we see only the doorway, closes it gently and says, "Not this way, not now, not for you." What we hear as refusal is often rescue. What we interpret as loss is sometimes mercy disguised as silence. Closed doors teach us discernment. They ask us to examine our motives and our mirrors. Are we seeking this path because it feeds our purpose or because it flatters our pride? Are we chasing validation or answering a calling? When the door stays shut, we are invited inward to sit with ourselves long enough to hear the truth that applause often drowns out. There is dignity in being redirected. God's no does not diminish us. It defines us. It draws a boundary around what will not serve our spirit. Like a parent guiding a child away from a hot stove, God's closed doors keep us from harm we would have mistaken for opportunity. The burn we avoid is often more significant than the prize we pursue. Sometimes the door closes because we have outgrown the room. What once fit no longer does. The ceiling is too low for the vision rising within us. God refuses to let us shrink to stay comfortable. Closed doors push us into the open air where our lungs can expand and our dreams can breathe. Growth rarely comes with an invitation. It comes with a nudge. There are closed doors behind which old versions of ourselves still linger. Habits that weaken us, relationships that drain us, fears that whisper lies we have already outlived. God closes those doors so firmly that even nostalgia cannot pry them open. Not because we are unworthy of return, but because return would cost us the future waiting ahead. In the hush that follows rejection, real or imagined, we discover a deeper truth. We are not defined by entry, but by endurance. God is not building a resume. God is shaping a soul. A closed door does not erase our gifts or silence our calling. It refines them. It asks us to polish what we carry before we present it again. The ache of a closed door is real, and it deserves tenderness. Faith does not require us to pretend we are not disappointed. Even Jesus paused in sorrow. Even the strongest hearts bend under the weight of unanswered prayers. But sorrow, when held with trust, becomes wisdom. And wisdom teaches us that God's plans are wider than any single doorway. Closed doors also teach us patience with one another. When we recognize that God redirects us all, we stop measuring success by access alone. We honor the unseen journeys, the quiet obediences, the brave decisions to walk away when the door would not open. We learn that courage sometimes looks like leaving without bitterness. There is a sacred power in acceptance, not resignation, but trust. Trust that what is meant for us cannot be blocked. Trust that no closed door can cancel a divine assignment. Trust that God does not play games with our lives. When God closes a door, it is not to mock our hope, but to guide our steps. And then one day, often without warning, another door appears. Not louder, not sheenier, but truer. It opens easily, as if it has been waiting for us to arrive as ourselves, whole and ready. We step through with humility, carrying the lessons of every door that did not open. We understand then that rejection never had our name on it, redirection did. So we walk on, heads lifted, hearts steady. We release the doors that closed and bless them for what they saved us from. We trust the hands that turned the key. And we move forward knowing this: what God closes, no force can reopen, and what God opens, no fear can shut. Prayer is not a performance stage for heaven, nor a list of demands shouted into the sky. Prayer is a quiet turning of the heart, a gentle realignment of the soul toward its source. It is the moment we stop insisting that God follow our plans, and instead ask for the courage to follow God's purpose. In prayer, we are not bending God's will toward us. We are allowing ourselves to be shaped by a wisdom older than our worry. When we come to prayer, we often arrive tangled in desire. We know what we want, where we want to go, how fast we want to get there. Our words rush ahead of our listening. But true prayer slows us down. It invites us to sit long enough for honesty to surface and humility to speak. In that stillness, alignment begins, not with the tongue, but with the heart. Prayer teaches us how to listen, not only for answers, but for direction, not only for comfort, but for truth. God's will is rarely thunderous. It moves like a steady river beneath the noise of our fears. Prayer lowers the volume of our anxiety so we can hear the calm instruction underneath. It reminds us that God's voice does not compete. It waits. There is a surrender woven into prayer that frightens us at first. To pray sincerely is to admit that we do not see the whole picture. It is to loosen our grip on outcomes and trust that the one who sees the end from the beginning knows how to lead us through the middle. This surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom choosing peace over control. In prayer, our questions begin to change. We move from "why is this happening to me?" to "what are you teaching me here?" We stop asking only for escape and start asking for understanding. Alignment happens when our prayers mature, when we seek not just relief but refinement, not just answers but transformation. Prayer also cleans the lens through which we see the world. When we are misaligned, everything feels urgent, personal, overwhelming. Offense comes easily. Fear sits heavily. But prayer restores perspective. It reminds us that we are not alone, not abandoned, not forgotten. It anchors us in a truth larger than our circumstance and steadier than our emotions. There are days when prayer feels dry, when words fall flat and heaven seems distant. Even then, alignment is happening. Silence in prayer is not emptiness. It is space. Space for God to work beneath the surface, beyond language. Space for faith to deepen without applause. Prayer does not depend on feeling. It depends on faithfulness. Morning prayer carries a special power because it sets the posture of the day. Before the world speaks, before demands crowd the mind, prayer gently says, "Begin here." It aligns our first thoughts with gratitude, our first breath with trust. It reminds us that the day does not belong to our schedule, it belongs to God. Through prayer, we learn to recognize open doors without rushing and closed doors without resentment. We begin to see guidance where we once saw obstacles. Alignment sharpens discernment. It helps us distinguish between what is good and what is God-ordained. Not every opportunity is an assignment, and prayer teaches us the difference. Prayer also aligns our relationships. When we sit with God, pride loosens its hold. Forgiveness becomes possible. Compassion rises. We stop needing to be right and start wanting to be loving. Prayer softens the sharp edges of the heart and reminds us that we are all walking wounded, all seeking grace. In prayer, we bring our brokenness without disguise. God does not require polish, only honesty. Alignment does not mean perfection. It means openness. God meets us where we are and leads us where we need to be. Each prayer is a step toward that meeting place between our will and God's wisdom. Prayer steadies us in seasons of waiting. When answers delay, prayer keeps us from drifting into despair. It reminds us that waiting is active, not passive, that trusting is work, that faith grows strongest when it must stretch. Alignment in waiting teaches us endurance, the quiet kind that does not announce itself but lasts. Over time, prayer reshapes our desires. What once felt essential begins to feel optional. What once seemed impossible begins to feel promised. We find ourselves wanting what God wants, not because we have lost ourselves, but because we have found our truest self in alignment with divine purpose. Prayer does not remove struggle, but it changes how we carry it. It places weight on stronger shoulders. It gives meaning to pain and direction to effort. When we pray, we are reminded that our lives are not random, that our steps are seen, that our tears are counted. And when prayer becomes a habit rather than a reaction, alignment deepens. We no longer run to God only in crisis. We walk with God daily. Prayer becomes conversation, companionship, communion. It becomes less about asking and more about abiding. In alignment, peace arrives not because everything is resolved, but because we trust the one who is resolving it. We rest in the assurance that God's will is not cruel, not careless, not confused. It is deliberate, loving, and just. Prayer places us inside that will where fear loosens and hope takes root. So we pray not to escape life, but to enter it fully. Not to control outcomes, but to trust direction. Not to be changed instantly, but to be shaped faithfully. In prayer we are aligned, and in alignment we are held. Wednesday stands in the middle like a steady witness. Not the excitement of beginnings, not the relief of endings, but the long breath in between. Wednesday does not shout, it hums. It asks us to keep going when enthusiasm has thinned and the finish line still feels distant. It is the day that teaches endurance, not the glamorous kind that wins applause, but the quiet strength that shows up anyway. Endurance is waking up when the miracle has not yet arrived and choosing hope over habit. It is tying your shoes when the road feels unchanged, when yesterday's prayers seem unanswered and tomorrow's promises feel far away. Wednesday reminds us that faith is not only believing that God can, it is trusting that God is already working even when we cannot yet see the fruit. There is something honest about the middle. Beginnings are full of dreams, endings full of celebration, but the middle is where the work happens. Wednesday holds the weight of unfinished tasks and unanswered questions. It is where we learn who we are when motivation fades and commitment must carry us forward. Endurance is born here, shaped by repetition, strengthened by persistence, refined by patience. On Wednesday, we discover that progress is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like survival. Sometimes it sounds like a whispered prayer instead of a shouted praise. But survival is not small. Waking up again is not ordinary. Choosing to stay kind in a weary world is an act of courage. Wednesday honors the strength it takes to continue without certainty. Endurance teaches us how to walk without rushing. It trains us to pace our spirits, to breathe through resistance, to understand that lasting faith is not sprinting toward God, but journeying with God. Wednesday does not demand perfection. It invites perseverance. It says, stay, try again, take one more step. There are moments in the middle when doubt grows bold. It questions the worth of effort, the promise of reward. But endurance responds with memory. It remembers what God has already carried us through. It recalls nights we survived that once felt unsurvivable. Wednesday is built on testimony even when testimony feels quiet. Endurance also reshapes our expectation. We learn that strength is not always dramatic. Sometimes strength looks like gentleness with yourself. Sometimes it looks like resting without guilt. Wednesday gives us permission to slow down without giving up, to rest without retreating. It reminds us that even God rested, and the world did not fall apart. In endurance, we learn humility. We stop pretending we can do everything alone. We begin to lean on God, on grace, on community. Wednesday reveals the beauty of dependence, the holiness of asking for help. It teaches us that endurance is not stubbornness, it is trust stretched over time. The middle teaches us how to wait without bitterness. Waiting can harden the heart if we let it, but endurance keeps the heart open. It believes that something good can still grow in the soil of patience. Wednesday asks us to water what we cannot yet harvest, to care for dreams that have not yet bloomed. There is a sacred discipline in continuing. Each Wednesday prayer is an act of resistance against despair. Each step forward is a declaration that hope still lives here. Endurance is hope that refuses to leave, even when comfort has packed its bags. Wednesday reminds us that God often does God's deepest work in the middle. Not at the moment of calling, not at the moment of arrival, but in the long stretch where character is shaped and faith is tested. The middle is where we learn to trust God's presence more than God's performance. In endurance, our faith matures. We stop needing constant sign. We stop bargaining for proof. We learn to walk by trust alone. Wednesday faith is steady faith. It does not panic at silence. It does not collapse under delay. It keeps its eyes lifted even when the road bends. Endurance also teaches compassion. When you have lived in the middle, you learn patience with others who are still there. You stop rushing people toward healing and allow them to heal in their own time. Wednesday people know that growth cannot be forced, only nurtured. There is beauty in endurance that the world often overlooks. It does not sparkle, but it sustains. It does not rush, but it reaches. Wednesday strength does not announce itself, it simply remains, and remaining is a miracle. Some Wednesdays feel heavier than others. Some arrive carrying grief, disappointment, exhaustion. But even then, endurance whispers, this is not the end. Wednesday is proof that you have already made it this far. And if you have made it this far, grace will carry you further. Endurance teaches us how to trust the process without idolizing the outcome. It frees us from the pressure to arrive quickly and anchors us in the faithfulness of daily obedience. Wednesday teaches us to show up fully in the now, not just dream about the next. In the middle, we learn gratitude for small mercies, a kind word, a quiet moment, a breath without pain. Wednesday trains our eyes to see blessings that do not come wrapped in celebration. Endurance sharpens our awareness of God's nearness in ordinary moments. And slowly, so slowly, we almost miss it. The middle begins to change us. Our prayers deepen. Our fears soften. Our confidence grows roots. Endurance does its work quietly, faithfully, completely. Wednesday does not promise ease. It promises strength. It does not offer shortcuts. It offers companionship. God walks with us through the middle, matching our pace, steady and sure. Every step taken in endurance is a step taken with God. So we honor Wednesday. We honor the middle. We honor the courage it takes to keep going. Because endurance is not just surviving the wait. It is becoming who we are meant to be while we wait. Waiting is one of the most honest places a human heart can stand. It strips away our illusions of control and leaves us face to face with our need to trust. Waiting asks us to slow our breathing, to soften our fists, to loosen our grip on certainty. Without faith, waiting can feel like punishment. With faith, waiting becomes a promise unfolding in quiet time. Hope does not arrive shouting. It enters gently, often while we are still unsure whether to believe again. Faith gives waiting a language beyond frustration. It teaches us to expect goodness even when the evidence feels thin. Faith says something is happening here even when our eyes cannot yet confirm it. In waiting, time stretches. Minutes feel heavy, days blur. The mind wanders toward fear and the heart leans toward doubt, but faith steadies us. It anchors us to what is unseen yet certain. Faith reminds us that God is not absent in delay. God is present in process. Waiting is not a void, it is a workshop. Faith reshapes how we experience the wait. Instead of counting days with impatience, we begin to count blessings with gratitude. Instead of rehearsing worst-case scenarios, we rehearse promises. Faith does not deny pain. It places pain in a larger story where purpose still has the final word. Hope is born when faith meets endurance. It grows slowly, like a seed beneath the surface. At first, there is no visible sign, but faith keeps watering the soil. It trusts the process. It believes that roots are forming even when the ground looks unchanged. Waiting becomes sacred when faith teaches us to expect growth underground. There is a courage required to hope while waiting. Hope is not naive optimism. It is disciplined trust. It is choosing to believe in God's faithfulness even when outcomes remain unclear. Faith does not promise speed, it promises presence. And presence is often enough to carry us through the longest nights. Waiting reveals what we truly trust. When distractions fade and answers delay, faith is tested not to break us but to deepen us. Faith learns how to stand without proof, how to breathe without guarantees, how to lean on God without conditions. In that leaning, hope strengthens its spine. Faith teaches us that waiting is not wasted time. It is formative time. It is where patience grows muscle, where humility finds balance, where gratitude learns to survive uncertainty. Hope matures in the waiting room of faith. It learns how to be quiet without disappearing. There are moments in waiting when faith feels fragile, when hope flickers, when discouragement tries to move in like an unwelcome guest. Faith does not shame us for these moments. It sits with us. It reminds us that even a mustard seed of belief can move mountains of despair. Hope is sustained not by circumstances, but by conviction. Faith convinces us that what God has spoken will not return empty. Waiting becomes bearable when faith reminds us that God's promises are not limited by our timelines. God's work is not rushed, and neither are we. Faith also transforms how we speak while waiting. Our words begin to change. We speak less of fear and more of trust, less of delay and more of direction. Hope listens to our language and grows accordingly. Faith teaches us to speak life even when life feels paused. In waiting, faith trains our vision. We begin to see beyond the immediate. We notice strength we didn't know we had. We recognize grace we once overlooked. Hope grows not because the wait shortens, but because faith widens our perspective. Faith turns waiting into worship. Each patient breath becomes a prayer. Each unanswered question becomes an offering. Waiting becomes an act of devotion when faith chooses trust over complaint. Hope blossoms in that sacred exchange. Waiting with faith also changes how we relate to others. We become gentler with those who are still waiting too. We stop offering rushed answers and start offering presence. Faith teaches us that hope is contagious when it is shared with compassion. There is a refining fire in waiting. It burns away entitlement and strengthens reliance. Faith emerges purer, steadier, more resilient. Hope becomes less about outcomes and more about assurance. We learn to trust God's heart even when we cannot trace God's hand. Faith teaches us to rest while we wait. Rest is not giving up. It is trusting deeply. Hope breathes best in rested hearts. Faith tells us we do not have to exhaust ourselves proving our belief. Waiting becomes lighter when faith allows us to rest in God's promises. And then, often when we least expect it, the waiting shifts. Not always into immediate answers, but into clarity. Peace settles. Fear loosens. Faith has done its work. Hope stands taller. We are no longer the same person who began waiting. We are stronger, wiser, more rooted. Faith does not rush the wait. It redeems it. It turns uncertainty into expectation, silence into preparation, delay into development. Waiting becomes hopeful not because it ends quickly, but because faith walks with us through it. Hope teaches us how to live fully, even while waiting. It allows joy to coexist with uncertainty. It allows gratitude to share space with longing. Faith makes room for both. It reminds us that waiting is a chapter, not the whole story. In faith-filled waiting, we learn to trust again. Not just God, but ourselves. We learn that we can survive uncertainty, that we can hold hope without breaking, that we can wait without losing our way. Faith turns waiting into hope by reminding us that God is faithful, present, and purposeful. The wait will not last forever, but the growth will. And when the answer comes, we will recognize it, not just by relief, but by readiness. So we wait, not empty-handed, but full of faith. And in that faith, hope rises, steady and sure, carrying us forward one patient breath at a time.